were driving to Columbus, and what was put on the radio?
Hamilton, the entire soundtrack.
You can't listen. Columbus is not a long enough trip for the whole thing, though, right?
But you got to come back too.
That's only 4 hours, though. It's like what, like 6 or 8, right?
No,
Is it?
not with just the music. It's like
Oh,
20. It's like 22 songs or something like that. It's not anything massive, but like there and back, you could listen to the whole thing.
damn.
And I'm not gonna lie, I like the music. It's not that I don't like it
That's great.
it's great. But my wife is one of those people who can listen to anything over and over and over again, but my ADHD doesn't allow me to do that because like all I want to do is like click through things, or I want to like find it. My big kick has been getting really mad because I can't find like old songs that I listened to in high school because I can't remember the names of them. And I like go on Spotify and try and find playlists that include them, and they may not even exist. Like it could be the Mandela effect. They just may not be real. But
Do you remember any like the lyrics from any of these songs?
I believe I do. But then when I say, like, whenever I ask somebody about them, they think I'm going nuts.
You may be, but I've been there before too. I don't half the time I never actually knew like what the song was called. I just like knew what it sounded like and knew some of the lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, and I can't even uh I can't even remember half because it's so. I mean, what, it's now almost 11 years ago that I graduated from high school. So
That to me is all 2000s era country because my mom my dad would listen to Froggy 99, which is country station in Parkersburg. My mom would listen to Mix 100, which is oldies. Any country I know, like almost exclusively any country music I know came from that era just because I would be riding in the car with them, which is good country. I mean, you had Garth Brooks, you had Gretchen Wilson. It was a big one back then, Redneck Woman.
you had Dixie Chicks, not just the Chicks,
Yeah, well,
as they're known now.
they kind of got canceled around that time.
They got canceled
Unfairly. It was
because of
bullshit.
talking about George W. Bush.
Because of Toby fucking Keith is why. Mr. Red
Yeah.
Solo Cup.
Okay, I don't want to get claimed on here. If you
That's an original. That's a derivative work, right?
No, I was gonna say the words to the song, and then
That's still fine.
Oh, okay. I'm not gonna do it though. But I thought about this the other day. Now that we're talking about songs, and maybe
That was a bastard, orphan, son of a whore. Sorry, go ahead.
Please stop, because that song's gonna get stuck in my head very quickly. Actually, it's said like 3 or 4 times in different songs, so it could be any song now. I was thinking the other day because I watched I watched a guy today get really mad at a flea market, right? Because he didn't want to put his mask on. It really upset him for some reason. He claimed to have health issues, but here's the best part. So he's getting into it with the employee, and as he walks out, he pulls a mask out of his left pocket, as if it had obviously had been there the whole time, and he had worn a mask at some point. He doesn't have health problems; he's just a dick. And
one could argue that being a dick is a health problem.
Well, that's true. That could be true, but it started to make me think, because he was like in the boomer age type thing. I started to think about something. People like boomers, when they get mad, they'll do what that guy did, right? Like they'll scream like "shove it up your ass," which is exactly what he said, because they just they're just so short tempered.
I just want to pause you for a second. The irony of him pulling the mask out of his back pocket after he said to shove something up his ass is just great.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. That is very fair. But then I started to think, okay, what do millennials do when these things happen? Like, obviously this isn't for everybody, because there are some terrible millennials out there. I've seen it, obviously we've seen videos and stuff, but like when boomers get mad, like they'll go online and type in all caps that they're upset, or they'll just scream at people. when millennials get mad, I I just feel like everybody walks to their car and listens to Dashboard Confessional. Like it's like a
You're not
totally
wrong.
it's like a totally different thing. And like, they're sitting there screaming at people, and I'm I'm trying to calm myself down with Hootie and the Blowfish.
Listening to Hands Down. That's yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that being a digital native generation is helpful because as boomers grow older, and we've got some boomers that listen to us, and they're not all bad. So I want to
No,
clarify that.
and I'm that's not what I'm saying. I'm just I'm obviously stereotyping a whole segment, which is pretty much the opposite of what this show stands for. But I just
But
thought it was funny.
some stereotypes are born out of accuracy.
Mm,
That one
true,
is.
but still, I just think it's funny because um, the good thing about boomers is like they are always willing to kind of face problems head on, which I think millennials have an issue with all the time. I think we always try to kind of scapegoat our problems, or sometimes even blame others for our problems. I think that that's kind of our generation, unfortunately, at times. But they go head on, but sometimes they go too hard, is kind of my point. So, like, while they're facing issues head on, we're in the car sobbing to Adele. Like, it's just a big generational difference.
I would say speak for yourself because I can solve a lot of problems while listening to Adele.
Okay. I mean, I didn't say you couldn't solve the problems. I just said that you'll
I'm
walk away from the problem.
crushing them. No, I mean I'm put them head on. I just got Adele in my ears, man.
Well,
Crush it.
okay. Well, I stand corrected.
That's right. I'm checking you on your stereotypes. That's what this show's all about. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably there's some accuracy there, I'd say. I have not I've not really witnessed many anti-masker events. I think probably because of where I live, but it is kind of funny to see people make those claims because I would just be willing to bet that probably 99% of people who say they have a health problem don't. There was this video that went around, and I think it was like a kid with asthma put on I want to say it was like 100 masks and ran a 5K or something to prove that you could still wear a mask with all that.
And not to mention, if you do have health problems, why are you out?
Yeah, that's the solution.
That's it. I'm so sick of people who are like, well, if you don't, if you want to, if you're so afraid, stay home. Well, how about this? If you have a health problem and you can't wear a mask, stay home.
There you go.
It works both ways. It's
It does.
insane. And I unfortunately in my area, I hear this a lot. I see people all the time who they make sure that they're not wearing a mask, like in the store and stuff. They post it on Facebook and Twitter because they think it's really cool. Because around here, it is really cool. It's like the fun thing to do because that's what unfortunately views are around here right now. But then I go to places like Columbus, like we were talking about earlier, and everybody's wearing a mask, and it's not a problem. It blows my mind how quickly 2 hours can change things.
It's so funny, but not funny, not like haha funny, but it's so dumb to think that that's something that is a badge of pride for people. This is kind of a disgusting equivalent, and I don't care. I've made other comparisons like this before, but this is like having an infected scab and peeling the scab off and then taking a selfie of you like rubbing it over the table at a Wendy's, being like, yeah, fuck the system. It's gross. But that's what it's become because now masks are political.
Yeah, I mean
They're not,
eh,
by the way.
but they've been made into a political weapon. As it's been weaponized by politicians, and that's what I hate about this.
It's not politicians though really that's doing it. It's like right-wing media heads that are doing it, like the Charlie Kirks of the world. It's less the politics. I know that they're not doing much to stop it, and a lot of them are reinforcing it. But I think the biggest problem is those people that are actually the ones that regular people are listening to.
No, I could see that too. I mean, it's definitely them, but you would think as a politician or as somebody's MTG is a really good example, right? Like she make sure that it's like always in your face, like that she doesn't want to wear a mask or that she's not wearing a mask. It's just blowing my mind. Like back in the day, we had politicians who spoke out against that stuff and would simmer things down. But now politicians just love the attention, so they run into the burning building too.
Yeah,
It's
I'd say I think it's, I don't know. I don't know how common it really is among politicians. I know that Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Lauren Boeberts of the world essentially use their elected office as a way to boost their followers
Ted
on Twitter.
Ted Cruz.
Yeah, that's three people. Okay. I mean, like, I
I,
get
I
it.
could
I get
I
what you're
could make an
saying, but
entire list of the current congressional members that do that.
I'm just
There's a
saying
lot.
that I'm not defending them by any means. I'm just saying I think the bigger problem is the like fringe media rather than the politicians themselves.
Yeah, it could be.
I'm not saying that they're not a problem,
Yeah, I get it.
but I just know that there's a lot of people that couldn't give a shit about the politicians in Congress, but they'll listen to Seb Gorka or Dinesh D'Souza. And I said both of those names specifically because JD Vance did interviews with both of them recently.
Of course.
I'm not going to talk about JD Vance, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Mr. Man of the People.
Man of the people.
Man of the people. Speaking of men of the people and women and gender non-binary of the people, John, we've got new patrons.
All right, so we have 5 new Patreon members. We're very, very thankful to have each and every one of these people join the community, is what I like to call it, the Patreon community. And
I call
that
it the
is
Empire.
the Empire. Okay, that could work too. That's Max, Kevin, Trish, Sam, and Tanya. Or Tanya. I don't know.
If it's a Gretchen Wilson pronunciation, Tanya Tucker.
Right, like that. That's where. So look, I love the name either way, and you can message us and let us know the exact pronunciation, and I'll even say it again next week to clarify, because I don't think it's right if we're not saying people's names correctly. So if we ever mispronounce it, let us know.
Let us know. Let us know. And part of this benefit
Sounds like you're saying "let it snow."
let it snow. And part of this benefits include a weekly exclusive bonus segment. I know exclusive and bonus kind of are contradictory, but I don't care because this is our show and we make stuff up. This week, this is kind of the subject of your beef, I think, this week, but it's also going to be expanded upon in the exclusive. We're going to be talking about mall Nazis. And that may sound playful, but it's not. The great city of Parkersburg. Right next to it is a city called Vienna. And the Grand Central Mall is there. There was a bunch of pictures taken of these foolish, racist assholes wearing Nazi swastikas. And it brings about a larger discussion of what is really going on in this world, this country, and in our community.
And I will say before we jump off, not to kind of switch gears, but just a quick update for every Patreon member out there. If you're listening right now, we just implemented 2 new changes to Patreon. We think it's going to make it even better. All $5 and $10 members are going to get sent a sticker after 3 months. It's a new sticker. We've never released it before. It's going to be sent to all, every single one of you. And then if you're at the $15 level after 3 months, even if you've already gotten a shirt, you're getting another shirt. You're going to get, it's again, a Patreon exclusive shirt that we've never released outside of Patreon. It has to deal with Mothman logo, but there's no colors. It's all black and white, and Mothman eyes are red, which I think is pretty sweet.
We're just here to clothe you. That's all we're doing.
That's what this has become. I mean, even our $500 joking one gives people clothes.
We're good Samaritans. We give the people clothing.
Look, I just want to become the Appalachian FUBU. That's really all I want. I loved FUBU growing up. Loved it.
Cool. Well, there you have it. Join patreon.com/appodlatch and help John's dream come true.
Help me get on Shark Tank.
There it is. Shark Tank TV show. Moving on, though. You never know. Look, I like to clarify things that are said because there might be somebody listening out there that thinks you want to literally get into an actual Shark Tank.
Um, yeah, that person doesn't know me well.
Or do they?
Dun dun
Well,
dun.
speaking of knowing John well, boy, do we have a real banger today. By that I mean not. I don't know. I don't know what we have today. We're gonna be talking about voting and specifically what some states are doing to try to prevent you from doing it. This and by you I mean it's mostly targeted at black people, people of color in Appalachia. Sadly, John, voting, fundamental, important. What how hard is it to vote in West Virginia, do you think?
We do have some issues when it comes to the amount of polling places, especially we had a lot of issues in the primary because they consolidated a lot of voting areas into one. So you were waiting like 3 hours to vote, which I know is not a lot for some areas, but it is for West Virginia. And it's really hard because you're consolidating it to where rural individuals have to come all the way into a town that they don't normally come to. But besides that, the general was, I think, pretty easy. In terms for me, I don't know if other people had issues.
Yeah. So I've had a mixed bag in Tennessee, Virginia. I mean, it was easy for me because I can get a license and everything, but they have voter ID requirements there. The thing is, and I think you would probably agree with this, my opinion is that it should be really easy to vote because it is a very simple fundamental right that is it enumerated in the Constitution? It is, right?
The right to vote?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah. And then it was amended to
Now,
allow black
now you're
people and then
making
women.
now you're just making me question. But yeah, it was because it was originally written for wealthy property owners.
Yes, rich white landowning males.
Yeah.
Then eventually it trickled down to other people. But yes, very important. And you know, the thing that has been going on for a long time, and this is true, and I'm not trying to be like overly partisan here, but the Republican Party has been pushing restrictions to voting rights, voting access, voting ability, and availability for a really long time and has been very successful at it in a number of states. And you look at places like Tennessee, for example, which used to be a Democratic state. Now it's not. But the more important thing is, I think this was in 20, maybe 18 or 17. It hasn't changed much since. They were 50th in the United States for voter turnout, which is horrible, and it's because a lot of people couldn't vote for a number of reasons we'll get into. John, I wanted to go through real quick and just talk about a little bit of specificity, but not a ton. Some of the current bills that are being proposed right now in Appalachian states that deal with restrictions on voting. And these are from everywhere from Mississippi to South Carolina to Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Georgia, but primarily Georgia, Alabama, Virginia, so on, limiting who can vote by mail, stricter voter ID laws, cutting voter registration opportunities, more aggressive voter purging, limiting the amount of places that you can vote, and limiting the timeframes you can vote. I want you to tell me, John, any of those, you can pick any one that you want. What is the purpose of that? In your opinion?
Well, I think so. One of the ones that I think stands out for me because it's just one of the most annoying ones is this idea of limiting who can vote by mail. Um, we've established throughout this entire country that voting by mail is a fundamental right that people have because the ability to get to one place or the other to vote is really hard. We haven't made election day a federal holiday. People don't get off work just to go vote. So the ability to vote by mail is is a really great thing. But if you do this, you're targeting people who are lower socioeconomic status, who have to work all the time, who are normally paid hourly, who can't leave and go vote, which tends to be more on the minority status. They know who they're targeting with these bills. And the funny thing is, or I guess I shouldn't say funny, the sad thing is, in Georgia, for instance, the voting by mail law was implemented by Republicans in 2005. It's not a Democratic law. It was a Republican law in that state, and now they want to pull it because they lost. It blows my mind that this continues to kind of get pushed. And the worrisome thing is this isn't the only state that's going to do this. There's going to be multiple states. West Virginia is going to be one of them. I'm calling it now, that are going to bring this up and start, trying to save their elections, as they'll say.
Yeah, and the point you brought up about vote by mail and how Republicans used to champion it up until this past election is, generally speaking, their demographic of voters were the ones that took advantage of vote by mail. It was often people who were older, generally voted more conservative, and so that's kind of one of the big reasons why they're for it. And now, as we saw with Georgia, Arizona, but specifically just throughout the country, is that a lot of people took advantage of it because it's easier, it's way more convenient, and so you have a lot of people, like you mentioned, who can't afford to take time off work. Often lower wage earning people tend to vote Democrat, who, with the opportunity given to them to vote by mail, was a good one. And so some of those restrictions, I'm not sure about Georgia specifically, but it was some of the limitations around the country are like for people who, what was it, like had health conditions and they couldn't go out and vote or something like that.
And Georgia's change, what they're doing is they're changing it to 65 and older can vote by mail if you have a disability, or if you can show proof that you won't be available on election day. Who like this is insane.
Here's my work schedule. Like what's even an applicable proof?
Well, you have to show that you're not going to be in the area. They made sure to define it, that you're not going to be in the area when election day comes, not that you're going to be at work or anything like that. They know exactly who they're targeting.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, and you bring up Georgia. Georgia's a good one to focus on. So, John, I've got a quiz for you. There are currently 165 bills in 33 states that deal with restricting voter access. The top three, I want you to try to guess the top three states. I'll give you a hint. Two of them are Appalachian states, and one of them that is not an Appalachian state flipped blue.
Okay. All right. Well, we already talked about one that I would guess, and that's Georgia.
Georgia, that is correct. Georgia is in third with 11.
Okay. So not they're not massive amounts. So, okay.
Still a lot.
Right. I'm saying like there's not somebody out there that has 60 bills, Let's see. You said Georgia. You said I'm gonna go. I'm thinking, since you said flip blue, I'm gonna go with John McCain's old stomping grounds.
Arizona, that's correct. Arizona comes in first with 19 restricted bills.
Okay, that's a lot. Okay.
That is a lot, and I'll give you a hint. This third one was a little bit harder. That third state, it's in second place, 14 restricted bills. It is an Appalachian state.
Mississippi.
Incorrect.
Kentucky.
Incorrect.
Okay, I'm gonna go with my first choice, and this was really actually what I was gonna guess. Tennessee.
Incorrect.
Okay, I was never gonna guess anything else.
Tennessee, in fact, according to the Brennan Center, doesn't have any, which really? I find shocking, and I need to check on that. But the second one, this is a little disappointing. Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well,
they got a crazy legislature, though, I think.
Yeah, I mean they're kicking people out of the legislature, refusing to put people in office,
kicking out former Appalachia guests out of the legislature.
Now, I did send a letter to Senator Brown, just warning him that our guests do have they do have a history of getting kicked out. So I wanted him to be careful on the Senate floor.
That's right. I was like, listen, if y'all lose in 2022, I mean, you might get kicked out. I don't know.
We're gonna have to keep record of that too. Like, people who have come on the show, we're gonna have to keep record of win-loss records, because if they win, it was obviously us.
Right.
And if they lose, we have to think of an excuse.
Yeah. Well, we've got some time. At least Fetterman's election is not till 2022. So.
Right. And then today we heard that we also learned today that Charles Booker is going to be running against, or thinking about running against, Rand Paul in 2022.
Truth, strongly considering, and he is a former guest on this show last February.
I'm just gonna call it. He's running. I anytime someone says strongly considering, they run.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd say so.
And we'll talk one day about, obviously where we are or what we think's gonna happen in those races, but I do think that he's gonna pull the trigger and run. And I think he should.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got momentum.
He does, and he's got a hell of a platform, hell of a personality that can really bring people in. I think so. I think it'll be interesting.
And
to see him.
let's not forget, only one of the people in that race has been on Appalachia.
That's a strong argument you make. And
if I'm gonna let him know that he should put that on mailers, because if you're not, I mean, what are you doing?
Well, I think, to be fair, formally have to say, Dr. Rand Paul, you have a formal invitation to join Appalachia.
Come on in.
Now he can put it on the mailers.
Right, because now we've invited his opponent.
Yeah.
Do you think Rand Paul is going to show? Dr. Rand Paul is going to show up?
Give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna try to switch Wi-Fi's because I think. Am I coming in spotty to you or not?
No.
Okay, never mind then. Then I'm not going to do it. Do I think what? Rand Paul what?
Do you think Dr. Rand Paul is going to come on Appalachia?
No, I don't.
I hope he does. I'd like to look. Rand Paul and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but I will say he's an interesting character.
I mean, I'll talk to any. Well, let me just not say that. I won't talk to Nazis, but we're not against having Republicans on. In fact, we want to have them on to talk to them. That being said, I just don't hold out a lot of hope that he would do it.
That's fair.
But you know what? Never say never. Never say never. That's what Justin Bieber always taught me. So, all right, we put it out there. It's in the world, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Lost the thread a little bit here, so bring it back. But I'm glad that we mentioned that, though, because that was a big announcement from him.
Mm-hmm.
Very exciting stuff, too. So I hope that he does, in fact, go forward with it. So, John, we mentioned Pennsylvania, and I haven't gotten into too much with Pennsylvania because what I really wanted to focus on was Georgia. But Pennsylvania and Georgia, too. In fact, let me just rewind a little bit. All 3 of those states technically flipped blue in the presidential election because Pennsylvania had gone for Donald Trump in 2016. So make no mistake that it is no coincidence, at least in my mind at all, that this is happening because, I mean, all those states, all 3 of them, I believe, greatly expanded their vote by mail efforts. And Pennsylvania and Georgia specifically were scrutinized by the president, the then President Trump, because of, he thought that there was some fraud. There was not. It's been noted several times in many publications and many independent reviews that there was no fraud. But that, to me, I don't understand how this is not getting more attention. Honestly, I don't, because so much of this is going to sound so preachy and so like poli-sci 101 of me, but so much of the fabric of our democracy, or whatever you want to call it, hinges on voting. It does. It really does. And you know, there's so many criticisms and go around about that, but it does. And the fact that there are these legislatures who are doing this, make no mistake, to suppress the vote of people who tend to vote Democrat, many of which are people of color, low-income people, simply to tip the scales to their advantage electorally. Feel free to question that, but that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, it's obviously I want to be fair in discussing both parties when it comes to these things. Obviously, right now we're focused on what the Republicans are doing throughout the state legislatures. But I read an interesting article while prepping for this that I think most people don't think about when it comes to Democrats and the bills that they've been pushing since like 2009ish, and that's to separate elections, which I didn't think was a big deal. So what I mean by that is moving elections from a off year to another year. What's wrong?
Nothing. I was trying to get my desk was vibrating for whatever reason.
Okay.
So from an off year to another year, can you explain what you mean by that?
Okay, so I guess I should make it to where it's like, so 2008, right? For instance, the President Barack Obama ran, and obviously Democrats wanted to consolidate that year, but that's not always the way it is. So let's say you had an election in 2020, and in West Virginia, Supreme Court justices, right? Let's say they're running in 2020. When you consolidate things in elections, and you have more things on the ballot, more people show up to vote. But if you separate things out, less people show up to vote because they're not as interested in voting for whatever's on that ballot. Democrats
Right.
are notorious for passing, or at least trying to pass, bills that end consolidation. They're trying to push things out because they want less voter turnout on that, because they tend to be Republicans. And I didn't know that. 538 did an article on it. It was really interesting.
That's interesting because normally higher turnout yields more positive results for Democrats.
Well, and that's what I thought too. That's where
At
I
least
was like,
okay, that's the conventional wisdom. I don't have any real data to back that up, so maybe I'm wrong.
right. It was based off a book. I'm trying to think of her name. I have it up because I thought it was political scientist Sarah Anzia. She wrote a book. She's from the University of California, Berkeley, and she discusses it throughout. I mean, I think it's worth it's worth looking up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. I think more elections should be consolidated just because of what we just said, where when you have more elections, you inherently you have to take more time off work. You have to find a way to get to the voting site. You have to be able to actually physically get there and vote. You have to know about it. You have to know about the candidates, everything. I'm for more consolidation because I think it just makes it easier for everybody to vote in all the elections.
Right, and you would think that would be something that the Democrats push, but it's not. Those consolidation bills are actually proposed by Republicans, and only 25% have passed, all due to Democratic opposition.
Huh. That's unfortunate because that's another
And
that to me that's another way of suppressing the vote.
Right, and the reason I want to bring that up is because obviously what we're seeing Republicans do is kind of like in your face voter suppression, right? But then you start to peel back the onion on what Democrats have done, and you're like, wait a second, they're also not this like party of happy-go-lucky voters. Like, they're trying to do the same. They're just doing it in a different way, which blows my mind.
Yeah, I think
now obviously it's not as racially triggered, I don't think, but it's still suppressing the vote.
Right. When we need to get into that too. I will say that, yeah, overtly there are much more efforts by Republicans, and it's pretty deliberate in why they want to do it. But one thing that's important, I think, to mention is the racial background of voter suppression laws in general. Almost all of them is that, I mean, this goes back to the Jim Crow era, right? Like what is it, poll taxing and literacy tests in order to vote.
Yes.
And that all was targeted primarily at Black people because they didn't want them to vote. And so then there's a nasty history with both parties, but specifically Southern Democrats at the time. Now, granted, Democratic Party today, you can argue is much different than Southern Democrats, Dixiecrats, or whatever you want to call them back in the 60s, 50s, but the roots of that are rooted in racism. And a lot of these laws that seek to restrict voting rights and voting access is also rooted in racial tendencies, because a lot of times, even though a law doesn't have to say Black people are not allowed to vote in order to have the same effect, I think is the point. You can have something that says everybody can vote, but you have to go to this one precinct in an affluent white community that you may not even have access to, so stuff like that. But I wanted to touch on one that I personally didn't know about until moving to Tennessee, and just was honestly like blown away that this even exists. And it's not just a Tennessee thing. Vote purging. You know what vote purging is, John?
Yep.
So, actually, did we run into that issue in your camp? Yeah. Well, why don't you talk about that real quick then? If you want, you don't have to.
No, I will. I mean, in 2018, we had essentially the Secretary of State went down. People had voted within. It was some arbitrary number. I think it was 2 years is what they were saying, which to me is ridiculous. And essentially, so they would purge people off the list, so you couldn't go vote because you were no longer technically registered, and you can't just show up and get an absentee ballot at that point because you're literally not registered. It's a massive issue, and they don't notify you in time. Which
No,
we can argue if that's we can argue if that's on purpose or not. But we ran into that a lot because the community that I was running in they were older, and it was rural. So a lot of places it was more difficult to come in and vote at the local high school, which is where it was. So people wouldn't come out because, I mean, I'm talking, rural, like, in November, snow's coming and you may not be able to get to the polls type thing. And that's what happened, I think, 2 years before that election. And that's why some people didn't vote, was because it snowed on election day and people couldn't get out there. And
right.
we had a massive amount, and it allowed. The other scary thing that people don't talk about when it comes to vote purging is it also allows secretaries of state to look at boundaries, because they're looking at the actual number of people in each area who haven't voted. But then they start to look at boundaries and they play with boundaries, because that was the other issue that came up. Is
when you say boundaries, what do you mean boundaries?
District boundaries. So like
Okay.
the definition of let's say the 59th district, right? And so we had people who in the primary were in my district, and then in the primary, and then in the general they weren't, because while doing voter purging, they also looked at the boundaries and said, oh, wait a second, the boundary is actually here, not here. And so not only did that happen, but that purged people out of the district because they were no longer registered in the right district. So it's a massive issue.
People that we know who voted Democrat in the primary.
Correct. Yeah, who would have voted for me.
Right. Because especially if you voted Democrat in the primary, you're going to vote Democrat in general. Like that's insane. That to me is so egregious. And you're okay. And so to your point, vote purging is literally purging or getting rid of someone off of the voter rolls. And to me, it's egregious. And they always like the excuse is always, oh, well, it's for data integrity. It's because we have too many names in the system, because, they don't use a cloud or anything. And you run out of room in the pipes of the internet to have all these names, I guess. So in Tennessee, this is kind of the archaic rules for Tennessee. If your name has changed and you have not notified the election commission within 90 days, gone. And so, John, I know it's hard for you to put yourself in the shoes, and for me too, because I haven't changed my name. But like, think about if my wife, for example, getting married. I don't think that changing her voter registration was necessarily on the top of her list, and especially if you don't know about that rule. And so the effect of this, and I'll go through the rest here in a minute, but I do want to say the effect of this is if you go to vote, you are not on the voter list. And a place like Tennessee, and I'm assuming West Virginia too, does not have same-day registration.
Correct.
And so you can see where these chips start to stack together and disenfranchise so many people. Now, if you have same-day registration, that problem gets resolved. If you're convicted of a felony in Tennessee, which is, I think, for the most part, aside from Florida and a couple other states, I do believe that you're purged. Not saying that that's a good thing, but that's not just a Tennessee thing. If you have moved out of the county, or if you've registered to vote elsewhere, if you fail to respond to a notice confirming your voter registration, and if you fail to update your voter registration over a period of 2 consecutive regular November elections that you did not vote in. So if you just don't vote in 2 November elections, they can pop you off that list.
I think that's what West Virginia's rule is: 2 consecutive November elections.
Which is so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if I don't want to vote in that election? I don't have to.
Well, that's the thing too, is the Constitution protects the right to vote. It doesn't say you have to vote.
Yeah, it effectively protects your right to decide
to
not
show
to.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it protects your right to show up on election day and cast your ballot.
Mm-hmm.
But they're making sure that that's not the case.
Under the guise of data integrity and just wanting to make sure that everybody is registered at the right place. It's so ridiculous. And they're usually the response is, well, we mail people and let them know. Well, let me tell you something. That doesn't always work.
Yeah, I mean, they're unless they and of course they don't mail it certified.
Oh no,
because that would cost too much money and guarantee that it gets there.
Taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to just kind of put this number into perspective. So this is in 2019. Ohio, 460,000 people were purged from the voter file.
Yep.
Georgia, 313,000 people in October 2019 alone. 313,000 people. That is, let's see. Let's put that number. That is about half the population of the city of Nashville, roughly. 313,000. That is 10 times the population of Parkersburg, John, where you are right now, I believe. It's roughly 30, right?
Yeah, it used to be more, but now I think it's only 30.
That's a shitload of people.
It's so many people.
10 cities of Parkersburg. That's insane.
Yep. And still no Target.
Still no, yeah, right. My mom is gonna hear that and just put praise hands up like preach. No Target.
Got a Sheets, got a Home Goods. Speaking, I'm not gonna get started. I tweeted this out, but Home Goods, man, great grocery store. Grocery store.
They're a solid store. Solid store. They're owned by TJ Maxx.
I know, they're right next door. Both great. They both have great food.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I wanted to dial back to Georgia real quick because there were a couple specifics aside from what you mentioned that I wanted to point out, just to kind of give listeners a little bit of perspective about, because I know that we've been talking very generally about this, but in Georgia, and this bill passed, I believe, on March 1st. So when you're listening to this, roughly 2 weeks ago, it was a bill that restricted ballot drop boxes, requires more ID for absentee voting, and limited weekend early voting days. So all things that, in my opinion, are ridiculous. Like limiting ballot drop boxes is stupid.
Yeah.
It's absurd. You have to go out of your way to vote. This is the whole thing. It's like it's supposed to exacerbate inconveniences, number one, but also disenfranchise people who are limited in their means. Now think about this. And this is a problem we dealt with in Tennessee a lot. Let's say that you, John, live. We'll talk about Georgia. Let's say you live in one part of Atlanta. All right. And you're poor, you can't afford a car. So you have to rely on public transportation. They restrict the number of ballot drop boxes. Now, the only place with a drop box is 5-10 miles away from the nearest bus stop or nearest transit stop. You are shit out of luck, aren't you?
Essentially, yeah.
Unless you want to walk 5 to 10 miles to drop your ballot off.
Yeah, I mean, this is frustrating too because I don't know. I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but like this is one of those situations where if you're limiting someone's voting rights, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, whatever, whoever's doing it, it's wrong. I mean, the ability to vote is a fundamental right in the United States. It's the reason why the Supreme Court has protected it at all costs. It's the reason why politicians should protect it at all costs. But we're now, I believe we used to be a democracy where the people really did elect the best person or the person that they thought would do the best job. And now politicians aren't looking at that. They're looking at how many voters they can stop from voting for the other side. And I think that that's really sad.
It's that whole, it's kind of like the same saying that goes along with gerrymandering. It used to be where voters pick their politician, but now it's politicians picking their voters, or picking, in this case, it's picking the people that they don't want voting against them.
Exactly. If they can hold people out, then they can win.
Yeah. It's so shameful because it's such an egregious thing to suggest that my vote, your vote, a black person, a brown person's vote doesn't count or should be harder to count than others.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that bothers me too is like we keep, we're focusing on it benefiting the people who are creating this legislation, but there's down ballot ramifications to this too. Like this isn't just going to affect the higher up races. This affects your Supreme Court races, which a lot of states right now have moved to the independent only. I know at least West Virginia has, where all the Supreme Court justices are looked as independents. But you're going to stop people from being able to vote for their Supreme Court justice. You're going to stop people from being able to vote for their own mayor. I mean, it's just the down ballot ramifications of this is really, to me, super scary, because I always argue that local politics are far more important than federal politics most of the time, because you're dealing with those people every day, and their laws are what change your life. And the fact is, like, this is going to be sad for the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was one point that I was hoping to make. So I'm glad that you did, which is that these local elections are the ones that really matter. All of these things that we've talked about have been with state legislatures. Now, that's not to say that Congress hasn't proposed voting restrictions in the past and whatnot, or are currently considering them, but everything we talked about, state legislatures. So you're talking about local representatives, delegates, state senators, those types of people who are making these decisions, and who, in a lot of those races, I don't know what your voter turnout was, John, but a lot of those, the voter turnout is like 20, 30%, maybe 40% in a super big race. But a lot of times it's 20 to 30% of the registered voting population for that district turning out to vote for somebody, which means that roughly 15 plus percent or whatever of the registered voting population are electing that person.
Yeah, and it just
I don't know.
that
was some fast math. I don't know if it's right, but I think so.
It kind of just hit me too, with you saying that, and it is interesting. So, if you're right now in most elections, I would argue in rural states, Democrats aren't going out to vote, and it's because they feel hopeless, because they don't think that their presidential candidate's not going to win, their senator's not going to win, stuff like that. Well, it just hit me, if they don't vote in 2 November elections, they're going to get purged, and then there's going to be even less Democrats in there. And the same goes for Republican. The same's going to go for Republicans too if that happens. But this is only going to hurt the parties themselves too, because you're going to have hopeless for a while, and we know it flips. It always flips. I don't know if West Virginia will flip anytime soon, but then you're going to have the other side who's hopeless, and then they're going to have to purge those voters and then come back. It's just a huge mess.
That's a great point. And in a place like Tennessee, where a lot of Democrats don't feel like there's much point in voting, I mean, I can't imagine how many of them haven't turned out for 2 of those, but they're going to be booted off the rolls. They're done.
Imagine if I don't know California's law, but I'm going to assume that they don't have these types of voter purging laws. But let's say they don't. Republicans, a lot of them skip voting in California, especially if they're in the really large populated areas, because they don't, there's no point in them showing up in their eyes. And that's what you're going to start, you're seeing that in rural areas too. The only difference is in these rural settings, they do have voter purging laws. So it's going to hurt at the federal level and the local level, just based off of not participating because you don't think you're going to win. And people don't even know that this is the ramification that's going to come. Yeah, they think that there's one less vote, but they don't think that their voting right is going to get taken away. But it is.
It is. And so I want to give you some numbers here to put in perspective for West Virginia, just because I want to back my data up here. In 2018, that would be your election year, for the general election, and this is not like your election specifically, but just general election overall, 47.93% turnout out of registered voters in the state.
Yeah.
That's it. That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the 1.2 million people that are registered in West Virginia, a little less than 600,000 voted.
Yep. I
And
remember ours was like a little over 50, and people saying that that was one of the highest areas.
in Morgan County, which is one of the counties you ran in, 47% voter turnout. And in, was it Berkeley that was the other one? Or
Yeah, Berkeley.
Berkeley was 44% turnout.
Right. I remember the Morgan County part of my district having substantial turnout because most of them obviously are Republican on that.
Yeah, and I know I'm getting bogged down in the numbers, so I don't mean to, but it just shows you, like,
It's a good example.
Right. Well, and McDowell County, which is one of the poorest counties in West Virginia, 27% turnout in the election. 27%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's crazy. It is and you think about what types of, I know I'm going on a diatribe here, I'm sorry, but what types of things would change if turnout numbers boosted up or people were able to vote? Anyway, I know I'm getting on a rant here, so I'll get off my soapbox.
It's all right.
Well, that kind of wraps up the discussion about voting. I hope that you all found it interesting and helpful. I think it's really helpful to talk about this stuff because a lot of times, you hear about it passing on the news, but you don't really get to conceptualize it, or you just don't think about it, or you don't hear about it. But this stuff is real and it's happening. It's disenfranchising a lot of people. And so there's a lot of people now that are in power making decisions that were elected by a very small minority of people that essentially they chose. Shameful. But anyway, wrapping up, it's time to nestle on in the great bambino of beef with Big John.
Ladies and gentlemen, live from Parkersburg, West by God, Virginia, it's the 18 Husky himself, Beef with Big John.
All right, I have an honorable mention real quick. And this is I don't always do this, but I do have it's with a House of Delegates member here in West Virginia. It's not a bill that you would probably think I got beef with, but real quick. So House Delegates member Riley Keaton, who is an 18-year-old kid who just won his election. He beat a friend of mine named Mark Pauley, and essentially this bill that just went in, it went up. It stops. Chuck, you're not gonna believe this. You're gonna tell me I'm lying, but I'm not. I promise.
Okay.
It ends the tax on figurines and any other things that have to deal with like Dungeons and Dragons.
I didn't know that there was an individual state tax on that.
There's not. Like, he wants to end the sales tax on it.
Like a line item sales tax?
That's my understanding of the reading.
Wow.
Is that it's been put in. Now, hear me out.
Nerd.
Because I agree with what Riley's doing. I think it's great. But he needs to go further. If you look behind me, I've got a ton of figurines called Funkos. Those need to be put in, Riley. Put that in right now, and I'll support this 100%. I think what you're doing is great. I don't always agree with you, but I think what you're doing is great, but you're just not going far enough. On a side note, I don't think that ever passes, but I did see it, and a lot of people were tweeting it at me, so I had to mention it.
High times for the 12-sided die.
Right. That's good. Okay, the real beef here has to do with where I'm sitting right now, Parkersburg, West Virginia. Chuck, we tweeted out a picture of some guys walking around Vienna, West Virginia, the mall there, the Grand Central Mall, which a lot of West Virginians know. And
know it and love it.
They were wearing Nazi symbols, swastikas, right? And Chuck, I don't know. Did you read the comments that we got?
Generally, there was a lot. So, I mean, the general consensus is that people wanted to inflict physical violence on them, I think.
Right. And that's not what I got beef with. I got beef because
I don't have beef with that either.
A lot of people made assumptions that people in Parkersburg or people in Vienna were okay with this. That they, oh, I'm not shocked it happened there. Well, I am. I live here. I live here. I'm here all the time. I don't see that kind of stuff. That's not Parkersburg, in my opinion. I'm not trying to say that, there's no racism or anything like that going on. I'm just saying that is not a fair assumption to make about this area. I understand that West Virginia has its issues, but stopped these two individuals and essentially told them to get out or he was going to kick their ass, and made sure that these guys left. And every time they muttered to him, he'd turn right back around and make sure they walked out the door. And nobody's talking about that, right? Like that people were lined up to stop these guys from doing, this terrible, I would just say, kind of gallery of hatred, based off what they're wearing. But people were stopping that. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is, I think, even more upsetting, is that if you go through the thread, you'll not only see people making that assumption, but then you see people connecting it to drug abuse, to addiction, and saying, oh, Parkersburg is filled with druggies who do all these kind of things. They're probably all methed out. Give me a break. Parkersburg has been dealing with a drug issue, just like West Virginia and just like all of Appalachia has been dealing with a drug issue, and has been doing a better job here recently by allowing even more rehab centers to come into the area. Without Parkersburg, for most of you West Virginians, without Parkersburg, y'all would have a lot more problems than what you got right now, because Parkersburg has got a ton of rehab facilities and is allowing people to come in and use them from other areas. They're actually doing a really good job when it comes to these things. And the fact is, you have other West Virginians who are pointing the finger saying, oh, they got it worse than us, when we shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. And the fact is, you can have an addiction. Crazy enough here, Chuck. You can have an addiction problem and not be a racist. That's the other thing that really upset me with this, is there's some, that if somebody has an addiction, that they also are going to have this problem. That's not even close to being the case. These people do have problems. They need help. And that's why they come, to Parkersburg, or they go just to a rehab facility and get help. But it has no connection to that. And by doing that, you continue to push back, for what these people have accomplished, the people who have gotten clean, or, who are living a better lifestyle, or the people who are trying to live a better lifestyle. When you do that, you're setting them back. You're not being helpful in any way. In fact, you're being a hindrance, and you should be ashamed of yourself for saying these kinds of things, because you try to claim that you're better than everybody, or you're better than those people, but you're not. And you're part of the problem when you do that. And I won't sit here and harp on this, but this is something that really upsets me, because West Virginia has an issue, and we're all trying to fix it. We're all trying to help people, but you can't go out, and look at these people and say, I'm out here to help. And then once you get inside your house, or you get on Twitter because you think you're really cool and you're a really powerful keyboard warrior, but then you start typing all of these terrible things. Do you think that these people aren't going to see this? It just makes you look terrible, and it does nothing to help these people. I just wish that people would really start to think about the stuff that they're typing, because they try to say that they're better than what they're seeing elsewhere, but they're not. They're actually much worse.
That's interesting that people took that from Nazis in the mall.
It blows my mind. It's just, I get this a lot with West Virginians too, right? And I don't care if you're right, left, center, purple, blue, brown, white, whatever. The fact is, you can't be a different person in your real life than you are on Twitter, because people are only going to look at what you say on Twitter, because that's the only way I know most of these people. So when they say this kind of stuff, it makes me not want to associate with them, even though they may be trying to do good things. Who knows? But I think that there's this cycle of fake empowerment on Twitter, and then as soon I just hope that we become better. I'm frustrated by this happening in my town. I don't want it to happen here. Do you think I want people outside of this to think a certain way about Parkersburg. I live here. I own a house here. Like, people know I'm from here. But I can tell you this, there are a lot of people doing a lot of good things here too. And the fact if you're trying to group us all together, you're doing a disservice to most people, including Chuck, because Chuck's from here. So you're really doing a disservice to Chuck too. So even if you don't like me, which a lot of you don't, you gotta, yeah, his hands are over the old, the old motto of Parkersburg, which is "Let's be friends," which has now disappeared on the flood wall. If you look at the one thing I will say is that I am proud of is that the majority of people in Parkersburg were ready to flip over a car to get to these people. It wasn't like there was a massive people. Oh yeah, protect their First Amendment right. No, that wasn't the response.
Yeah, people were ready to take their trucks and hit them with them, and they love those trucks.
Right, like, and it's just one of those things that I think there's a lot of misconceptions, and I understand we said it at the top of this episode that stereotypes are usually they're brought on by real things, and we could talk about real things that are happening in West Virginia and Appalachia, but in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of most people, protecting Nazis isn't one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would hope not. I think what we'll do is so this is going to be a subject of our exclusive. So for y'all listening, if you want a little bit more of the talk about the mall Nazis and kind of what that means and how we process something like that, because it is worth discussing. We'll be talking about it in exclusive on Patreon. But I think we'll end with just saying that obviously it's terrible, and the fact that they felt that emboldened to go in there and do that is a problem in and of itself. But yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening again. Check out our store, new designs up there, new ones coming soon, all the time. Throw them up like, I don't know, like a dog that ate too much candy. We'll throw them up there. And
why did you say a kid that ate too much candy? Why does that have to be a dog?
Because my dog's been thrown up a lot lately. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. I don't know. Oh man, and it's not from candy, thank God. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. Check us out on Patreon and everything else, and we will talk to you again next week.